Hey, Alter Everything listeners. We wanted to let you know that you can join fellow data lovers, analysts, and innovators at the Alteryx Inspire 2025 conference. It's the analytics event of the year, happening May 12th through the 15th in Las Vegas. Head over to alteryx.com/inspire to register now. We would love to see you there. Welcome to Alter Everything, a podcast about data science and analytics culture. I'm Megan Bowers, and today I'm talking with George Salmon, a data consultant at Bulien. In this episode, we chat about how he went from a new Alteryx user to advanced certified in just 23 days, and his tips for anyone looking to upskill and get certified. Let's get started. George, it's awesome to have you on our podcast today. Thanks for joining. Could you give a quick introduction to yourself for our listeners?
Absolutely. So I'm George Salmon. I finished university very recently. I did an MSc in financial and computational maths, and before that, a degree in physics. I've always been more on the sort of maths side of things. And recently I started a job with Bulien, who are a small sort of data consultancy in Northeast England, and that's where I started using Alteryx.
Awesome. I'd love to start off with hearing a little bit more about your background and your degree in computational math. How do you find that applicable in this transition into data analytics at Bulien?
Yeah, it's definitely been helpful. It's not directly related to Alteryx, really. There was nothing really data, but there certainly was some predictive stuff, so the predictive tool set maybe. But the way I view it is they're fundamentally the same sort of problems where you have point A, you have point B, you're given a sort of set of tools, and you have to make that process. And when I was doing maths, it was calculus and algebra. But now in Alteryx, it's a select tool, the formula tool. But I like to see them as fundamentally the same sort of problems.
Definitely. And a lot of that same kind of problem solving skill set, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's a certain way of thinking about things, and it's something that you definitely get better at the more you do. So I'd definitely say it's helped quite a lot. So I'm fortunate to be in a role where I get to use it almost every day. I really love doing it.
That's awesome. One of the main reasons I wanted to have you on our show was you went from really not knowing anything about Alteryx when you started your job to getting advanced certified in just 20 days. So can you just walk us through that journey and what that was like for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I do have a caveat though. After I made the community post, I did have a look. My account, I assume, was made on the Monday when I started, but it was actually made on the Friday before. So if you're being very technical about it, it is 23 days.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Oh, wow. 23 days. That's so much longer. Just ample time to get advanced certified.
Yeah, and it was a really great journey. I think I started off with the Getting Started Learning Path, which is a really fantastic resource for people who have no idea what they're doing. I would definitely say that the first two chapters, especially. And what I did is I started off by watching all those videos, and then I did all of the foundation weekly challenges. I think there's about 11 of them. After that, I took the test and passed first time, which I was really happy with. I wasn't sure what to expect,
The
but
test for the core
the foundation
or the
micro
foundation? Oh,
prediction.
yeah.
And I wasn't actually expecting to pass it first time. I thought it would be very difficult, but it's a really nice way of guiding you in. And then I moved over to core, where I took a slightly different approach. Instead of watching all the videos back to back, which was, I think, doable for foundation because there's not too much content. For core, I took a different approach where I sort of did a video, learned about a tool, and then implemented what I'd learned in a weekly challenge or something like that. So after I finished that, I ended up doing 38 core weekly challenges, which I think is excessive, especially if your only goal is core certification. 38 is a bit overkill, but I think for me, it was a really good thing to get the fundamentals down. Since I knew I was going to be going to advanced, I wanted to be really comfortable with the core suite of tools. And then I took the core certification exam. I passed that. I was really happy with myself because I did it very quickly as well. I think it was 10 days or something like that. And then when I moved to the advanced, interestingly, the website was undergoing some rebuilding or maintenance or something. So the learning paths weren't working at the time, which when it happened, I was like, oh God, how could this happen to me? It's so terrible. I look back on it now, I think it was a really good thing overall. It forced me into a completely new way of learning, which I think is the main reason why I managed to pass so quickly. And instead of just watching a video and then implementing it, I would throw myself at a challenge, really not knowing what to expect, failing, a lot of trial and error, a lot of feeling really silly, browsing the community for solutions. But I think that was a really good way of learning because it forced me to stop and think every time I was doing something. Right, I've got to Google this. Do I remember how to do that? And that really made things stick in my brain. I decided to change my frame of mind when I was doing the challenges away from this is something I've got to do because I've got to get advanced certified because of this job, which is a very, there's not much in it for me in that frame of reference. So I started viewing each challenge as like a new potential, almost like a mini hero's journey from a story. Whereas you go in, you don't know what to expect, you learn a load of new things, you fail over and over again, and at the end, you come out and you've learned something new. It was really enjoyable. Then when I took the exam on Wednesday, I think it was, I ended up getting 87%. So I was really happy with that.
That's really incredible. I mean, that's a really fast-paced upskilling and learning right there for sure. I like that perspective of viewing it as, what did you say? Like a hero's journey?
Almost like a mini hero's journey, yeah.
Yeah, it makes it a little more fun. And I know we have badges as you do more and more weekly challenges. So you're hiking the digital mountains,
Absolutely.
part of that journey and part of those little rewards and little fun things along the way. But I think that's really cool and huge encouragement to people looking to get their Alteryx certifications to really look into those learning paths as well as the weekly challenges and really diving in, like you said. I've heard that from other Alteryx users too. Like sometimes the best way to learn is to just go try it, learn by doing. You can't know what you don't know till you like get to a problem. So I think that's great advice as well. Were there any other like resources or strategies that you found valuable when you were preparing? When we chatted earlier, you mentioned using some more advanced techniques, even if it wasn't required.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess the first place to start there would be interactive learning paths. They can be great. They certainly have their place. For me, the weekly challenges were far and away the best way of getting to grips with the designer. I think one thing that's maybe overlooked is as a skill is learning how to troubleshoot your issues. That's something I think is really important, especially for the exam. It's open book, so you're allowed to have a look at the community, have a look at the tool information, and learning how to navigate that quickly is definitely something I'd recommend. In terms of using things where they're not necessarily required, absolutely. Macros and apps, they are a really cool tool that you can use, but they're not necessarily used very often. And when you're studying for the advanced certified exam, they're not going to come up frequently enough for you to be at a high enough level quickly. So what I would do is implement macros and apps in places where they're not required. Because as you said earlier, the only way to really improve, or in my view, the best way to improve is by doing. So the more you use them, the better you get. And that also goes for regex. There's a great website as a resource, regex 101. It lets you test your regex code. And for me, every time I came across a situation where I needed to use a text to columns, I'd immediately ditch the text to columns, put the regex tool in instead. If it took me 5 minutes longer, that will pay dividends in the future.
Nice.
And then moving from that, this is more recently after I passed the exam, but I think it is probably just as applicable before you take the exam, is doing solutions on the community. You get some really interesting problems there, and it's super rewarding when someone accepts your solution. It's a great feeling. Another thing would be user groups. I know they're not available everywhere, but I've been to the Northeast user group. Great place to meet people who are similarly minded. You can ask these people questions. They can have loads of experience that you can look at and you can use. And of course, working at Bulien, which is the company I'm with, they've got 3 aces, I think. So being around a group of people like that has definitely helped me on my journey. That's super valuable. Obviously, not everyone is going to have access to a team of 3 aces, but I think the community is definitely a good surrogate for that.
Anyone can go on the community and post a question and have access to not just 3, but many aces, top contributors, experts. And I love that our community is so responsive. And I totally agree. Like you said, going in and taking that next step to actually try to solve questions is huge. It's rewarding as well as interesting. You'll learn different strategies for those very real world problems that people are bringing from their own workplaces and experience. So I think those are some great tips. And I love the call out to user groups as well.
Yeah, I
We
think
have
they're
so
massively
many.
undervalued. I
Yeah,
really think they're a really excellent way to embed yourself in the community. I think it's easy to view Alteryx as something that's purely online, but it's not. These are real people and they come together, amazing things happen.
definitely. So we'll link that in the show notes, our user group page. And I do want to call out too, if there isn't a user group nearby you, there are ones that do meet virtually, as well as there's opportunities always to start up a new user group in your area. So I'll definitely link those resources for people that are interested in that. But I do think, yeah, the in-person community can be really valuable along that journey as well. So thanks for all those tips. Shifting gears a bit, I'm curious to hear, as a still relatively new user, what do you enjoy about the Alteryx platform?
Wow. Yeah. I personally think Alteryx is the best software you can use if you're handling data. I think the best place to start is within each tool, there's an input and an output. You can have 10 tools and you can look at the input and output of each tool individually after you've run a workflow. And you can really see what's going on within each tool. That's hands down my favorite feature. It makes debugging really easy. And also, it's just really cool. I think that's also important that you find this interesting, you find it cool. And I really think it is. I suppose the speed at which you can put together a workflow, solve a problem, that's really just look at the Grand Prix, for example, that you hold at Inspire. The speed of some of these people is really remarkable. I suppose the community in general, when compared to maybe other software communities, is a lot more engaged. The people seem a lot friendlier. There really are no stupid questions. We're all just here to learn as much as possible.
I enjoy that about our community. Not going to name names, but some other ones out there, they will shame you for asking a question. And there's no shame. There's no shame on our community, which I really appreciate for sure. It makes it a lot more welcoming to new people. And another thing I'm wondering, for your journey doing this in 23 days, is there, if you could go back, is there anything you would approach differently? Anything you would change?
I think the biggest thing I'd change, I didn't ask a single community question out of fear of seeming silly. As I've come to understand the community more, I've realized that's a really silly way to think about it. Interestingly, the way it's structured is if someone answers a question, they get a solution. That then adds to their sort of score. So even if you're asking silly questions, you're giving an opportunity for someone to come and answer, to gain score and reputation. And it also means that in the future, if someone has a similar question, they can just Google it and they'll find the answer to your original question. And you're just building this huge base of information and knowledge. That's something I'd definitely change. I'd perhaps also modify the way I went about practicing for the exam specifically. I think I'd do less memorizing and more getting familiar with the design, the platform, with the community page, with the tools, the tool information, because it is open book. You don't really need to worry about memorizing every little detail. You're not expected to know that. And I think maybe I put too much pressure on myself to memorize things that no one needs to memorize.
Well, yeah, I could see that coming straight from like an advanced degree program that's maybe ingrained and a different background than someone coming in who maybe hasn't been in school for 10, 20 years even. It can be a very different mindset to go like, oh my gosh, I'm taking a test. So it's nice that it's open book for sure and that not too much memorization is required. I'm curious, like for you and your company, what was the motivation for getting certified, or what value do you see in having these certifications?
Yeah. So I think the certifications are an excellent benchmark. It says you're at least this good. And the advanced certification means you're at least you're good enough at Alteryx where you could teach other people, where you could build complex workflows, you could use complex things like iterative macros, which for me have come up more than most things. I like to stick them in places where they maybe don't belong. And I think overall these certifications says we are at least this good. Of course, we're much better than, I would say, the average person who has an advanced certification, but they're an excellent benchmark. And I'll personally be working towards the expert certification, hopefully taking that when it releases. but I'll certainly be going for that. There's also maybe a gamified element of it where you want to have these things because it's another badge on the community. You're leveling up constantly. Because I recently reached level 10. I think it's a fireball on the Alteryx community. And yeah, that was a really rewarding feeling.
That's really awesome. Congrats on reaching that already, for sure. We've talked about your process for working towards these exams, your approach, why exams, why the certifications are important. Could you tell us a little bit about a project you're working on to create some content around, was it apps and macros?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be building some YouTube videos. It'll be a 21 part, they'll all be very short, but it'll be a 21 part series going through apps, macros, and there'll be some spatial stuff in there as well. I don't want it to be formatted as a sort of university course. I want it to be very much as guided learning, where most of the things that you're doing aren't watching the videos. It's going out, trying challenges, using the tools, getting to grips with everything. And that should be released around the 6th of February. Really excited for those. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun thinking about what to put in them and making them. And hopefully they'll be maybe more digestible than other forms of learning.
Yeah, totally. That'll be great to have some bite-sized content kind of around that on YouTube, and we can definitely link those in the show notes as well for listeners to check out. I'm curious what your encouragement would be for new users who are maybe intimidated by the tests. How would you encourage them on that journey?
Yeah, I think it certainly can be intimidating, especially for someone who has never used a programming language or never really worked with data in the same way. I think the important thing to remember, as we touched on before, is that you don't need to memorize everything. I like to think of it like learning to drive, where you're not going to learn everything about cars and everything about road laws before you have your first lesson. You sort of have faith that the more you drive, the more familiar you get with the car, you'll naturally just get better at driving. And that's what happens. And it's the same with Alteryx. It's all about building familiarity with the designer desktop, with the community, with the tool sort of documentation. And I think that's what the test really accurately tests for, is your familiarity and not your memory. You don't need to memorize everything. You don't need to draw the interface of a certain tool from memory. It's asking you things which you could easily access if you familiar enough with designer and all the documentation. So I'd say, yeah, the biggest piece of advice is get familiar with it, use it more and more, and eventually you'll be an advanced level.
That's great. So I think a nice place to end would be just to hear a little bit about, now that you're at Bulien, now that you're upskilled with Alteryx, how are you using Alteryx in your day-to-day work, and what kind of challenges are you tackling?
At the moment, I'm working on some data visualization things and data in a really wide variety of states, ranging from poor to awful. So at the moment, I'm using Alteryx as a tool to clean data up before implementing it in data visualization. I haven't yet been tasked with an Alteryx only project, but hopefully soon in the future, I'll get an opportunity to do that. For now, I'm spending quite a lot of time preparing for when the predictive master and the expert exams get released. I'm definitely going to have a go at those. Those are really interesting, especially the predictive set of tools. Fascinating. I managed to put an optimization tool in a batch macro and have it work first time recently, which
Very
is
cool.
probably my best achievement so far. Yeah, I'm really enjoying Alteryx. If you can't think of how to do something in Alteryx, you don't know enough about Alteryx. That's what I like to say. And I think the Python and the R tools within Alteryx fill any functionality that might be missing. We recently had a case where someone was trying to export data from Azure, and within native Alteryx, there's not a simple way of doing that. So we wrote a Python script, and then we were able to import the data from the Python script into the Alteryx workflow and then deal with it from there, which was really fun, blending these different ways of manipulating data, a bit of Python, some Azure database stuff, and then Alteryx, all blended together really nicely.
I do love that designer can be that Swiss Army knife where you can really tackle any sort of problem. It can be really satisfying to figure it out, figure those pieces out, and pull data from anywhere, as well as prepare it for visualization. That's a really common use case and one people can probably relate to. When you mentioned that the data comes in from poor to terrible, basically. I thought you were going to say from poor to okay.
I've not come across okay data just yet. I'm sure I will eventually.
Oh man, tough start, but pretty common, so I guess it's not surprising. But yeah, that's great that you're finding value in Alteryx and excited to expand into different advanced tool sets like predictive and stuff like that. So it was really cool to have you on to hear about your journey and just about everything that you've accomplished in a short period of time. We'll definitely be linking like resources that you mentioned in the show notes for anyone listening who wants to embark on a similar upskilling journey or just get more value out of our community. Everything you mentioned, I think, is free, and so that's like another huge thing for everyone
having
listening.
all of the interactive lessons be free for everyone is a really excellent move. It really doesn't matter who you are. I think that almost anyone can get the advanced certified certification. I really do think it's open to almost anyone.
It is, and I think that's a great place to end and a great encouragement for listeners to go ahead and go try for it. So thanks again, George, for joining and for sharing about your journey.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about resources mentioned in this episode and connect with George, head over to our show notes on alteryx.com/podcast. And if you like this episode, leave us a review. See you next time.